Hashut, Father of Darkness, bless me with the strength to conquer my enemies and to beat them with 30 ziggurats for their insolence. My Babylonian hat collection is growing bigger by the day, and my urge to play Chaos Dwarfs has never been greater. The Dawizar are on their way, but we don't know when and we don't know how yet. Frankly, there are other things Creative Assembly needs to worry about in Warhammer 3's immediate future before turning their attention to DLC, but there's still plenty for us to discuss and some interesting developments over the last few days. As you well know, there's a big open void in the Darklands waiting to be filled, and without the Chaos Dwarfs, the center of the map feels somewhat empty. We do have some news on that front though, because data mining has discovered intros from the Advisor discussing the Legion of Asgore, a sub-faction destined to be led by Drazhoath the Ashen, Lord of the Black Fortress. Conventional wisdom says that he'll be but one of the 4 playable Legendary Lords when their campaign pack drops, presumably in the next 3 to 5 months. Just like the Tomb Kings and Vampire Coast had, I expect Chaos Dwarfs to have 4 Legendary Lords on launch day as well, and he'll likely be joined by Astragoth Ironhand, the eldest Sorcerer Prophet and de facto ruler of the capital city of Zarnagrund, and then perhaps Zhatan the Black or Rykharth the Unbreakable. My vote would go to Zhatan because he's an actual army book character, and even though he's technically subservient to Gorth the Cruel, Gorth is more of a footnote and behind-the-scenes character, like Finnebar Seafarer for the High Elves, while Zhatan does all of his heavy lifting. Not to mention I find it somewhat unlikely that the Dawizar will have 3 Demonsmith characters. They'd kind of just be stepping on each other's toes. So Zhatan is logical in that 3rd slot as a melee-focused character, which then leaves the question, who should play the role of that 4th Legendary Lord? If Drazhoath will play the foil and rebellious sub-faction a la Arkan the Black, representing the Infernal Guard and unique aesthetic away from the capital, and Astragoth will be the faction leader in Zarnagrund with a focus on demon engines, and Zhatan will be a military expedition in an advanced location, sent forth from the Black Tower with hordes of slaves and artillery, then who is in that 4th slot? Who would change up the game enough to make them worthy of inclusion? Well, he's technically an Age of Sigmar character, but in an alternate universe, he was gearing up to be a big introduction in the End Times and the final editions of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and he represents a facet of the Chaos Dwarfs that none of the other characters should touch. His name is Shar'tor the Executioner, and he is known far and wide for having a very awkward name, and occasionally leaving dingleberries in his pantaloons. So in Dawizar lore, Bull Centaurs are known as Bahal, a twisted fusion of dwarf and centaur. When they first underwent their malevolent transformation eons ago, they became the right hand of the Sorcerer Prophets, entrusted as temple guardians, bodyguards, and used as a shock cavalry force in battle, which tells you a lot about how difficult the Chaos Dwarfs will be to balance, because they're dwarfs with all the hardiness and firepower of their cousins, with perhaps even better artillery, powerful mounts, flyers, lords of magic, and monstrous cavalry on top of all of that. So they have all kinds of options, and at least on paper, they seem like they're going to just be a better dwarf faction. But of these Bull Centaurs, the frontline troopers are known as Renders, carrying great weapons, spears, or spite shields laced with malefic curses. Their leaders are called Toruk, the largest and most powerful of their kind. They'd be hero characters, and leading them all is Shar'tor the Executioner, with an absolutely badass looking model. He is the Lord of all Bull Centaurs, a warrior priest and champion of the dark god Hashut. Beneath iron-shod hooves and a hulking, monstrous form, he crushes all who stand in his way, wielding the Darktide axe and the mask of the Executioner. He's essentially a holy warrior and religious zealot, tasked with driving his people into a frenzy with sacrifices atop the ziggurats of their major cities. At the pinnacle of Zarnagrund, there lies the Temple of Hashut, patron god of fire, greed, and tyranny, and it is here that the Bull Centaurs make their home, snacking on slaves and generally enforcing the will of demonsmiths and sorcerer prophets alike. Deep within, these guardians perform bloodthirsty rites, throwing captives into cauldrons of molten metal to the echoing laughter of the assembled Chaos Dwarf sorcerers, who meet there in a great conclave of evil to make their plans of world domination. If a rival needs to be assassinated in broad daylight, send in the Bull Centaurs. If 10,000 slaves need to be decapitated on the steps of the temple, send in the Bull Centaurs. They are the muscle and will of the Dawizar ruling class made manifest, so any character that is known far and wide as their lord is kind of a big deal. He is a towering, imposing figure, similar in size to a standard Dragon Ogre would be my guess, and in battle, reaps blood and skulls with the Darktide Axe, whose special rule, Darktide Reaping, deals extra damage and wounds on a roll of 6. From a fluff perspective, I would interpret that as an item similar to how Bloodgreed, Slaughter and Carnage for Scarbrand, or the Cauldron of the Great Maw for Scrag and Slaughter currently function, and that the murderous spirits bound within his axe become more numerous and more deadly the more he slays, so increased melee attack and weapon damage as he separates limbs and heads. His Mask of the Executioner also contains Malign Spirits, which lets him isolate an enemy unit, gaze at them, and deal up to d6 mortal wounds on a good roll, so some kind of direct damage attack as he gazes into their souls and explodes them from the inside with fear. Trample and Gore essentially gives him impact hits, similar to the Logistica attack from the Byzantines in Age of Empires 2, Age of Kings, granting trample damage in an AoE, so big charge bonus, big mass, extra collision attacks when he initially makes contact with an enemy, and just a whole lot of violent speed and momentum. And speaking of that, the Lord of Bahal would give him and all his Bull Centaurs extra charge for nearby troops, increasing their killing power as they gather around their lord. So in battle, pretty straightforward. He's a monstrous duelist with AP, some wave clear abilities, very tanky, quite mobile at around 75 to 80 speed, focusing on the more maneuverable elements of the Chaos Dwarf roster, and helping out on the Cycle Charge and Hammer and Anvil side, while some of the other Dawizar lords would focus more on the artillery, magic, or demon engine elements of the roster. From a campaign perspective, you could really start him anywhere out on a mission from the Sorceress Enclave with upkeep reduction and melee bonuses to Bull Centaurs and Toruk heroes. So why would his inclusion be surprising here? Well, like I said, he's technically an Age of Sigmar only character, but there have been quite a few rumors that he was originally planned as a Warhammer Fantasy character, and he perfectly fits the archetype of a lord choice that CA would want to pursue to give the Dawizar some more variety. With the cast of Drazhoath the Ashen, Astragoth Ironhand, Zhatan the Black, and Shar'tor the Executioner, you're pretty much hitting every single note, aesthetic, and playstyle of their faction, in a way that Rykarth and Gorth the Cruel would not. I don't necessarily think they would offer much more on top of what the other characters are already bringing to the table. Shar'tor brings something completely different that none of the other lords cover. So, I believe he will be and should be the 4th Legendary Lord in the Chaos Dwarfs campaign pack, despite the fact that he has an unfortunate name and gets made fun of all the time for pooping his pants. I cannot wait to see what CA has in store for us with the Chaos Dwarf campaign pack. I think they're going to be an extremely powerful and entertaining race that has a bit of something for everyone, and some of the coolest units, mounts, and lord choices in the entire trilogy. Not to mention the battle maps. Custom siege scenarios in Zarnagrun will be exquisite. Magma, volcanoes, tons of fire, darkness, and cool opportunities for lighting, with temples and ziggurats rising above the blackness. I think there's a sense of ambiance that you can't necessarily get in the Mountains of Morn that you could definitely get in the Darklands, in the cities of the Chaos Dwarfs, and that's an element I'm really excited to see. When the Darklands get fleshed out fully, when we see their stomping grounds in all their glory, it will be a good time for all of us, but maybe not for their slaves or Tsar Boris. He might be in trouble. Let me know which lords, characters, and units you're most excited for on the Chaos Dwarf roster, or how you want their campaign to function in general. Any thoughts, comments, or concerns, and I'll see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.